If you know that culture matters and are trying to shape it in your organization, this video is for you. Knowing what you're doing wrong can point you toward what works. Organizational culture matters more than strategy, according to management guru Peter Drucker. Culture guru Edgar Schein said that culture is the most important thing that leaders do because if you do not manage culture, it manages you. Okay, culture matters, but how do we shape it as leaders? Let me answer that by pointing out 10 ways that we do it wrong or ineffectively. Mistake number 1, weak case for culture change. You know you have this problem when your desired culture is a list of virtues that have little to do with your strategy. No one argues with the desired culture, and no leader can tell you why the culture is critical to the strategy. Or if they can, no one seems to care. At one company I worked with, they paraded in front of me a list of 7 cultural attributes they focused on. They were values, and I loved the list. Good start. And what are the biggest blocks to delivering on the strategy? That opened up a conversation that had little to do with the cultural virtue list. Oh, the cultural virtue list got some airplay in the annual shareholder meeting and spawned a bunch of posters. Here's the bottom line. No one argued the virtue of the 7 cultural attributes. And no one cared because what they actually focused on, rightfully, was their strategy. When you get to the place of seeing a key aspect of culture required to deliver on your strategy, you'll find interest among your leaders. I don't want to throw HR under the bus, but yes, the 7 cultural attributes were driven by HR. That's a good thing, but unless the top team sees culture as absolutely key to the goals that matter, culture change will die. And when it dies, it will be harder to change because of the failure. With culture change, we need a compelling why. Mistake number 2 is an unclear what. Culture change leaders love to throw around terms like collaboration, accountability, digital transformation, or excellence without defining it. It's defined when you know the key behavioral situations that matter most. An aerospace company knew that accountability was a key cultural attribute, had made headway in defining the why and what. But it got traction when leaders identified 3 behavioral situations that show accountability in action. Golden moment number 1 was when there's a problem issue or expectation breakdown, I speak to the right person to better understand the cause. We came to call this the gap. Others called it the screw-up. I prefer the first. Accountability scenario 2 that mattered most was the follow-up. I follow up on my commitments and those I influence. Often we would address gaps, but not follow up. We wanted to fix that. The third golden moment for accountability was fair consequences. This was a bit controversial, but let's face it. Without consequences, there are no teeth in commitment gaps. Our training focused on managing these 3 moments of truth for accountability. With behavioral clarity, we moved from virtue signaling to something we could teach and measure. Change got easier. Every time I've worked with a leadership group that uses behavioral scenarios like I described for accountability, but applied to collaboration, safety, you name it, clarity improves, and we accelerate change. So will you. Mistake number 3, no personal ownership. In mistake number 1, I identified the organizational why as a key to culture change. This is personal. Unless leaders have a personal reason to shape culture, it becomes a lost priority. Personal meaning is a matter of finding your reason. Back to accountability, one leader stood up in a meeting and said, "This place nearly died, and it's because we don't hold each other accountable in a healthy way." He went on to say, I can't live it with myself to see this place die, all for fumbling the ball on accountability. Other nodded, then jumped in with their own personal reasons to make change happen. Culture change happens when it gets personal for leaders. It will stall or underperform when leaders don't find their personal why. Mistake number 4, biting off more than you can chew. When a leadership team get motivated and committed, it's easy to take on more than you can handle. Hey, they got into leadership because they get stuff done. And with culture, it needs bite-sized focus or it will struggle to get results. Remember the list of 7 values we discussed earlier? After defining it and uncovering our why, we whittled down the list to focus on only one aspect of culture during the year. It was a hard sell and for good reason. Why cut the baby when the 7 attributes represent a gestalt, a complete picture of culture? The answer is obvious. Do we want to create momentum from results or not? The next task was to ask which aspect of culture, if improved, would have a positive residual impact on the other attributes. This shifted the energy of the leadership team. Like the song lyrics, one thing leads to another. The team began to rethink their cultural focus. After some debate, the team was delighted to agree that one attribute, if improved, would impact the rest and to focus there. That's the key. Don't ditch your bigger picture, but rationalize a more focused approach and you'll see results. If you can't see with focus, will yield residual benefits to other aspects of culture. Focus on the area of greatest passion. Mistake number 5. Approach it as a motivational challenge rather than ability. Who doesn't love a good marketing campaign complete with posters, a theme song, and a rally? But a motivational marketing approach misses the mark on what actually changes culture. Remember our behavioral scenarios? They lead to focused training. Training on key behavioral scenarios leads to behavioral change in those areas. A culture effort that might have taken years is not seeing results in months, if not weeks, when you focus on changing behavior in key situations. The real magic of taking an ability approach to culture change is that when people have an ability, they become more motivated. Wait, what? Again, when you raise ability in key situations, it fuels motivation. In the case of accountability, the supervisor that feels more able to handle gaps, follow up, and consequences will see the fruit or they won't. In the case of the accountability culture, communication improved, team accountability improved as behavior changed in a key aspect that mattered. And those results fueled an appetite for more change because the approach yielded fruit. Speaking of fruit, let's unwrap the next mistake. Mistake number 6, poor current state understanding. You need to be aware of what got you where you are in order to change it for the better. The short answer to the criticism of skipping this part is that you might be pushing a pull door if you fail to understand why the culture is where it is. Interviews and focus groups work to enhance your understanding of what got us here. I sent my top leaders out to do focus groups we called hair down current state groups with opinion leaders. I'll say more about the who choice later in this video. The framing of the focus groups were, here's where we're heading and why. Help me understand why we are where we are. We broke it out a little more than that, but you get the idea of what we were asking. Did the employees hold back? No, in fact, the executives were stunned at the candor because, no surprise, they wanted culture change also and were very frustrated at the pace of change. They unleashed on reward systems, how they understood priorities, barriers to successful change, and how to improve overall employee engagement. One leader who fought me early on saying they didn't see the value, later said, "This is a gold mine. I'm going to do more of these in the future." The later meetings were renamed skip-level meetings. And no, it wasn't a tattletale session on their supervisor, but was a way to enhance communication. When you examine the current state, look at past change successes and failures, HR systems and practices, supervisor behaviors that help and hinder, and rewards. With one group, we wanted process excellence in key areas of the business, but learned that the company rewards heroism so much that improving processes wasn't in their best interests. Yikes. Knowing this helped us create and implement a plan to address heroism rewards in a way that helped us pivot to process excellence. That brings us to the next mistake. Mistake number 7, poor measurement and adjustment. No change can succeed without course correction. No initial plan will ever be as good as the one that takes into account what's working and not working. Course correction starts with periodic assessments with key leaders, formal and informal, weighing in on the results and actions to adjust. When your culture change includes a clear focus with behavioral scenarios, it's much easier to measure. If you're rolling your eyes at the use of a survey to take the pulse, that's a part of the measurement approach, but not all. In the case of the accountability culture shift, yes, we created a baseline survey to take the pulse of the extent to which we did the critical behaviors. And we also looked at HR metrics, turnover, engagement, and disciple, as a lagging indicator of what we thought might be affected by the change. We also took pre- and post-training measurements that helped us understand our baseline and progress. A post-training measurement approach that gave us great insight was interviewing training participants after the class. We wanted to know, among other things, about critical incidents or examples of them doing the critical behaviors, how they address gaps, follow up, and administer fair consequences. These interviews were worth their weight in gold because of the insights they gave for course correction, but also celebrating where change was sticking. That brings us to the next mistake. Mistake number 8, leaders who won't teach. I know I sound like I'm preaching, that leaders should teach, and I am, but there's more to this story. When we did follow-up interviews, we had one group of trainees who got the professional trainers and another that got a leader-as-teacher approach that put their leader in the role of teacher. The follow-up interviews revealed that professional trainers got the highest experience marks. They loved the experience that professional trainers provided. But when we asked about critical incidents, times when they acted and aligned with the critical behaviors, we saw results but not what we hoped. When we asked participants in the leader-led training, they didn't like the experience but overwhelmed us with examples of how they applied it and got results. Would it surprise you to learn that, on average, we saw 7 times the examples given with leader-led training? Our leader-led pilot included volunteer leaders, and the results were so compelling that we jumped on this approach to accelerate the change. There are a lot of good reasons why a leader doesn't have time to teach critical culture behaviors. And none of these reasons compare to the value you get when a leader teaches critical behaviors that are strategically significant. One leader who resisted in the beginning, then later started teaching, said it well: teaching is leading. Leaders who teach tend to lead by example more than if they don't teach. Teaching helps them learn key concepts deeper and with a deeper understanding, behave differently. And in the shadow of a leader who is on the new page, so is the team. It's a powerful way to change culture, so use it sparingly, but use it or know that you're giving up a powerful intervention. That brings us to the next mistake. Mistake number 9, ignoring opinion leaders. Culture shifts when respected peers and formal leaders get on the same page. Elliot Rogers figured this out after reviewing many studies about how change really happens. Whether it's the introduction of a new drug, culture change, or really any fundamental change, when opinion leaders get on board, the change takes off. When I say opinion leaders, I mean informal and formal leaders whose opinions are valued by others. Because we are social creatures trying to make sense of change, we tend to value the opinions of key people. They help us make sense of change. While there are other factors that influence change adoption, opinion leader influence is the number one. Sure, you could spend your time trying to convince a group of late adopters, but your time is much better spent with those who have social currency with the larger population. How do you identify opinion leaders? Ask whose opinion do you listen to and respect when it comes to understanding change? I want names. They give them to me. When I speak to these opinion leaders, they're not easy to sell, but most are open to authentic dialogue. Never manipulate an opinion leader because if they smell a rat, they'll use their influence to derail cultural change. Instead, invite them to your current state focus groups. Their authenticity is exactly what you need to understand the current state. And because you're involving them, you'll gain their support if you authentically manage the relationship. When opinion leaders are on board, the water cooler conversation changes. And that's when a culture begins to shift, when the narrative of key people begins to shift. Let's take this home by looking at one final mistake. Mistake number 10, lacking a change infrastructure. If you've been around corporate change of any size, you know what I'm talking about, and this isn't a sexy topic. Like any strong project, it needs project warriors to take on key roles, an active sponsorship team, and supporting sponsors that can take the ball and run with it, such as leader as teacher. Your change infrastructure will vary based on what works in your organization, but I've seen far too many culture changes lacking this project management capability. Again, it's not a sexy topic, but if you don't manage culture change as you would any other program, it will lose steam and won't deliver. Okay, my friends, when it comes to culture change, these are 10 mistakes you can't afford to make. Is it true that if you don't do it wrong, you'll do it right? Use these 10 mistakes to identify critical actions that, if taken, will dramatically increase your results and in less time. That's a win any day. Thanks for joining us today at Organizational Excellence. Share your comments below.